Thank you, Presiding Officer. I'd like to thank the Cabinet Secretary for your statement today. And I think, Cabinet Secretary, we have to be honest with the people of Wales. This isn't anything new or nothing that we haven't been told before. What this is, it's a last-minute scramble. After 26 years of Labour running the NHS here in Wales, with just 12 months until an election, the Cabinet Secretary arrives here today with sweeping promises of urgency and ambition. But what this really reflects is a government that's finally realised and woke up too late that actual delivery on the ground matters. I know we've had this statement today, but I did read the speech you give to the NHS Confederation, and I know you had this report before then, so I'm going to focus a bit on that speech as well, because I think it does tie in together. I just want to say, first, I'd like to thank the Chair and all the members of that group for pulling this together. So this isn't nothing new, this is something we've all heard before. But what the Ministerial Advisory Group does lay bare is what patients, professionals and what opposition members here have been saying for years. Performance is down, productivity is poor, and patients are suffering as a result. And a report does make clear the operational performance of the core NHS services is in need of urgent attention and turnaround. And almost after 26 years of you in charge, now what you're trying to tell us is you want to create the best performing and most productive healthcare system in the world. And I share that ambition. I think for half the Welsh Government budget spent on health, I think it is right that we have the best healthcare system in the world and not being propping up at the bottom of all the league tables here in the United Kingdom. So I'd actually like to ask you, Cabinet Secretary, what fundamental changes are you going to make us the best performing healthcare system in the world? Because people have waited far too long for this change. I think it's about time we actually had some concrete answers of how you're going to do that. You spoke today about digital transformation. In that speech you give to the NHS Confederation, you did admit that our digital journey has been marked by under-delivery. And I agree with you, and many of us have been saying this for years. We've had the Digital Healthcare Wales, and I must ask you, Cabinet Secretary, what have they been doing? Because our digital infrastructure here in Wales has fallen behind. Basic integration between health boards still doesn't exist. They still don't share information between each other. And now, only years later, when we seem to have two Labour governments at either end of the M4, you want the NHS Wales app to integrate with the NHS England app, which to me make common sense. It's something that should have happened years ago, but just doesn't seem to be driven forward. But another part we see in digital infrastructure is primary care, and certain elements of primary care and allied health professionals, when they're still having to send letter and faxes up into district general hospitals because they don't have access into their systems. This isn't a 21st century healthcare service, it's a backlog of missed opportunities. So, Cabinet Secretary, I'd like to know from you today, how quickly can the people of Wales and the workforce in our NHS expect to see these digital changes actually delivered? Because we've had warm words for years, but no delivery. So I'd like to know when that's going to happen, and also the integration of a single patient note, so everybody across our healthcare system can see those notes of those patients. You also referenced the 50 million allocated to health boards to bring down waiting lists. And to give some credit, Cabinet Secretary, there is some signs that those lists are starting to fall. But you've also promised, as you said today, to that 8-week diagnostic target by March 2026. I'd like you to explain a bit more detail about that, how that target will be met, given the current challenges and capacity issues within the NHS. Does this mean you're going to be investing more money in rapid diagnostic centres, or are you going to be employing more staff in the NHS? Because if we don't see that, we're not going to see those tests done. On 2-year waits, I want to raise the issue with you about Powers Teaching Health Board's decision to ask English health providers to delay treatment for 2 years for people waiting for treatment in England, because that goes in complete contrary to what you're telling us on 2-year waits. You're asking about, we need to get 2-year waits down, but you've got a health board going against what your wishes are and saying you must make people wait because we can't afford to pay for it. I'd like to know why you're allowing this to continue and go and check, so it does go against current Welsh Government policy. And also the report does give a stark warning, Cabinet Secretary, about the future uncertainty, and it does say that there is a high risk that about instances of patient harm will increase and values for taxpayers' money will decrease. And I'm just concerned about how we're going to address that, because it does talk in the report about a rebrand of the NHS executive to create a new medical director for NHS Wales in current stature to the Chief Medical Officer. And I'm just interested how you think adding another layer of bureaucracy is going to sort these problems, because clearly we need to see delivery at pace, but is that delivery being all centralised within the NHS executive the right way to do it? I know I'm over time, but I'll just come quickly to my conclusion, Llywydd. You've said, Cabinet Secretary, that we need to grasp the nettle, because we've become a system that's become quick to point the finger. And I don't disagree with that. The system has done that. But what I want to know is, how will you grasp the nettle? And what specific challenges will you introduce to health board executives to make them truly accountable to you and truly accountable to the people of Wales? Because what I hear far too often is our health boards going contrary to Welsh Government policy and not delivering on that. So I want to know what legislative changes you're going to make to ensure that you are actually accountable for the NHS in Wales and health boards can actually report to you and not have the autonomy of what they do now. Thank you.
I slightly regret the churlish tone which the members brought to the piece of work which we're debating and discussing in the chamber today, and I wasn't sure whether he was attaching weight to it or not, but I'll do my best to try and unpack that from the questions which he put to me. He asked me what the specific steps are which we are planning to take, and I'm grateful to him for having taken the trouble of reading the speech which I gave on the 7th of April, which set out, as you will recall, a number of very specific steps which we're planning to take, which I think answer his question precisely. And this morning we published not only the recommendations from the report, but I was keen that we take the decision to publish our response at the same time, so that it is clear precisely what steps the Welsh Government plans to take against each of those 29 recommendations. And that enabled a discussion this morning, both with the Ministerial Advisory Group and with NHS leaders, so that those actions could be tested. Not all of them are actions which are in the hands of the Welsh Government, as he will appreciate, and I know he would appreciate that, given the last points that he made in his questions in relation to the balance of responsibility in the NHS. So between the statement which I made on the 7th of April and the statement which I published this morning, he will find a full description of the range of steps which we are planning to take. And I'm grateful to the Ministerial Advisory Group also for giving us a steer on the timescales within which they recommend that the various steps are taken. So he will also see in the document this morning that reflection of the 3-month time frame, the 6-month time frame, and so on, which will give, I hope, him and others a sense of the pace which we plan to bring in relation to the recommendations specifically. I mean, he is right to say, and I've acknowledged that in both the speeches I have made in the last few weeks, that the state of development of digital infrastructure in the NHS is not where it needs to be. That is obviously problematic from the point of view of improving performance. We need to make sure there is a clear digital underpinning to service improvement, so that it can continue to be able to take advantage of the most recent developments in terms of digital applications, technology, the growing use of artificial intelligence, and so on. He will have seen that over recent weeks I have taken the decision to escalate DHCW in recognition of the fact that they have a particular need for more support to be able to develop a stronger capacity for planning and for managing large-scale digital projects. But one of the tasks we have set this year in the remit letter, which he will, I think, have seen, is the outline planning of the integrated patient record. And I'm very optimistic that we will have, over the course of the next few weeks, some, I think, exciting announcements to be able to make in the digital space. He makes the point about having two governments working together, and I think was challenging me to say that, that those are the only circumstances in which I would be prepared to reflect on experiences from over the border. What I will say to him in the digital space, while his government was in power for the last 14 years, the absence of capital investment has been a significant impediment to developing digital infrastructure, and one of the many great benefits of having two Labour governments interested in investing in public services is now that we have, over the course of the next year, access to significantly more capital than the £1 million his government saw fit to offer Wales, I think, in the last 2 years of its government. So I hope he will welcome that changed approach. He makes an important point about diagnostics. We are planning over the course of the next year of investing in that space quite significantly on the basis of having that additional revenue as a consequence of the choices made by the Chancellor in the budget. And so I will be bringing forward further information in relation to that. I think it's a point which he's right to raise. On the question of Powys Health Board and the choices it is making, I just want to be very clear, none of those choices are going to enable it or allow it not to apply the standards which every other health board are applying in relation to the timeframes and the targets within which its residents need to be seen. So that is absolutely not part of what the health board itself envisages doing, and I would not be prepared to tolerate that. But I think it exposes, I think, a tension in his view of how arrangements should be made. At the end of the day, I am accountable for the strategy set for the NHS in Wales, the expectation that I set of the health service on behalf of patients in Wales, and providing funding and resources to enable that to happen. But the decisions on how healthcare is delivered on the ground necessarily needs to be taken closer to the people. The needs of a rural community in terms of the configuration of services is very different from that of an urban community, and there are other factors which come into play as well. So I'm sure he would think it better for that to be reflecting the needs of local populations, which is what our system is designed to deliver.